Okay, so this is one of those movies where the studio has gone super hardcore about not just casually dropping spoilers for what may or may not be going on in the plot, which is always kind of suspicious to me when it's a movie that's an adaptation of existing stories, because a really easy way to stifle any discussion of whether or not the movie works or good is to make out that you're spoiling the fun if you actually discuss any of it. Whereas remember how, like in Captain America the Winter Soldier, they didn't even try to hide who the Winter Soldier was going to be in the ads, even though it's a surprise in the plot of the film, because they knew they had a good movie, so it wasn't that big a deal that if you just Googled the name Winter Soldier, it was going to tell you. But then again, there are a bunch of super cool, surprising things in Spider-Man Far From Home that I wouldn't dream of spoiling, but there's also one kind of important thing in there that's really hard to review the actual movie meaningfully without getting into, that I personally feel is kind of a gray area because it's a this movie spoiler, but it's not really a Spider-Man spoiler, you know, but people are kind of hardcore about this stuff sometimes, so I'm just going to do a little warning now, okay, and we'll do the meaty stuff on the other side of it, alright? Okay, so short spoiler-free version, I really like this one. For reference, I'm that guy who thought Homecoming was kind of a snore, so it's a lot better than that one, obviously better than the two Andrew Garfield movies, because everything is. No, it's not better than the first two Sam Raimi movies, and as of now, I'm still of the mind that Into the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man movie ever made, but this one, recommended, worth seeing, 2 post-credit scenes, both of which are actually really important this time, but I like this one, I recommend it. We good? Good. So Mysterio is a bad guy! Yeah, I know, huh? The super well-known, fan-favorite Spider-Man villain, probably one of the 5 or 6 most recognizable Spider-Man villains by name and appearance, whose entire gimmick is faking stuff and tricking people so he can do crimes, is in his debut Marvel Cinematic Universe incarnation a villain tricking people so he can do crimes, even though he's initially presented as a cool new superhero showing up to help everyone out now that a bunch of Avengers are dead and or retired. But the thing is, I don't bring that up in the sense of some fanboy snobbery of, oh well, I might have enjoyed it if I didn't know what was going on ahead of time because I've read the comics, but to illustrate by confirmation that I knew Far From Home was working for me in most of the ways Homecoming did not, when I realized that I was invested enough in the plot that I'd forgotten to remember that I knew Mysterio's whole deal going in. Like, suspension of disbelief is one thing, suspension of knowledge is on a whole other level. Anyway, the story this time picks up after the events of Avengers Endgame and mainly concerns Peter Parker's attempts to work out new realities of his life now that he and half of the universe are back from the dead 5 years later, but the same age, thanks to the Thanos incident, and now living in a world where his friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is now one of the de facto top superheroes working, to the extent that it's clear that a lot of people expect him to be something like the new Iron Man. So yes, we're still doing the overly cute Disney, Sony character-sharing meta-narrative thing again, and once again it's laid on a little thick, but at least wait, does this mean I'm the top guy here now, gives Tom Holland more actual character beats to play with than all of the Spidey needs to prove he deserves to be in the MCU gags from Homecoming, which I got sick of very, very quickly. In any case, as concerns the actual plot, Peter finds his school science club summer trip across Europe covertly hijacked by a Nick Fury operation, battling what's purported to be an invasion from another dimension by rampaging elemental monsters with the aid of Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio, who claims to be a displaced superhero from the same alternate reality and thinks Spidey can be of help bringing things under control. You know, because the whole surrogate father figure thing always works out so great for Peter Parker. And yes, it's essentially the entertaining Washington, D.C. interlude from the first movie blown up to feature length, which is a pretty good place to start as sequels go, and clearly shows that while this franchise still isn't quite up to par with the rest of the MCU for scope and drama, and still can't touch either of the original Spider-Man films or the recent animated Game Changer in terms of visualizing Spider-Man action, with the exception of 2 bravura fight scenes involving Mysterio's illusions, director John Watts' aesthetic is still mostly like an expensive Disney Channel sitcom in terms of staging and texture and cinematic framing. It does know where its strengths are, the characters, and those work great. Holland and Zendaya have genuinely terrific chemistry once again. Jacob Batalon and Angourie Rice both get more screen time and develop as real characters as Ned and Betty Brant. Tony Revolori's Flash Thompson is still a delightful scumbag with real pathos, and Remy Hee as a new bad guy Brad has a lot of presence, which is good because it feels really transparent that they're setting him up to be something important later. And I also like, as far as the superhero stuff goes, that even though he gets a fair amount of screen and story time, Gyllenhaal's Mysterio isn't ultimately the most important part of it. He's at the center of things, obviously, but the eventual circumstances behind who he is and what's actually going on reorient what we think the film is about in such a way as to make it more intense, but also smaller and more directly about Peter's personal development. I was initially disappointed because it seemed like the whole playing it being a hero angle was building as some kind of self-aware riff on Marvel's own self-promotion machine, and that seemed like it might be funny, but that's not exactly exactly what they do, but like instead, they're continuing to lean hard on the idea that these guys are really dangerous people even when they're not in their costumes and gimmicks. Like, I didn't love everything about Homecoming, but that whole business when Michael Keaton turned around and just pulled a gun on him in the car was about one of the best Spider-Man scenes that's been in any of the movies, period. And there's stuff in this that gets at some of that same energy. Bottom line, I wouldn't call this the perfect or best superhero movie I saw this year, but Far From Home is a bunch of fun, and if you need a metric for that, again, remember, I'm the guy who didn't really like Homecoming. So 7 out of 10 for this one. Oh, and that first post-credits scene, that certainly invites a lot of possibilities I'd previously considered entirely unlikely. You'll see.